Wonderful. Hello, everyone. This is Xanda Hilger, and I coordinate the North Central Texas uh, Caregiver Teleconnection, as well as some other programs for family caregivers on behalf of North Central Texas Area Agency on Aging and the Dallas Area Agency on Aging. Today, we have a very highly qualified person to talk about housing transitions. Joan Blinn is a seniors real estate specialist. She works in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and she has been working with older adults and working with housing choices and needs since 2004. The Seniors Real Estate Specialist, SRES, is a designation from the National Association of Realtors. It requires ongoing continuing education related to clients age 50 plus. Joan and her husband Rick have helped over 750 families make life-changing transitions. What she's going to do today is talk about not only the housing transitions, what the choices are, but especially how to start those conversations that family caregivers find themselves. Where do you start? So, Joan, thank you so much for the work that I know you've been doing on this presentation today, and want to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Xanda. I appreciate it. Rick and I have moved over 8 times, and we have found that our transition to downsize was the most challenging of all of those transitions. You know, people move for a lot of different reasons, but older adults oftentimes find themselves needing to move. Sometimes they get to plan for it for, a long season, and sometimes it's a suddenly. So this is just a chance for us to look at what those housing options are and what you need to know and how you could prepare or best prepare for yourself if you're listening to this for yourself, or if you had an older adult, parents or loved one that is in a position where they may be needing to make a housing transition. Xanda shared a little bit about me already. One of the things about real estate is I haven't done it for my whole life, just since 2014, but many things prepared me for working with older adults. My family had a high value in the older members of our family. I had a great grandmother, I had great aunts, a great grandfather. We spent a lot of times in multi-generational kinds of gatherings. As I eventually got married and had kids, I definitely understand the challenges of long-term caregiving, which sometimes we have with our older parents. We had a special needs son who lived for 33 years who was completely dependent. And so the challenges of dealing with healthcare and all the things that your family needs in terms of modifications and things like that for a home, I understand that because I've walked through that. Other things that I've done that have prepared me for this time, it seemed like a natural transition for me to become a senior real estate specialist, because so many of our clients that we dealt with were older adults who were moving for many different reasons, whether it be for health reasons or wanting to be closer to family, and we also dealt with a lot of families that seniors had passed on, and now we're dealing with estates and selling under that circumstance. So there are a lot of different reasons why there would be a need for connecting with someone in real estate. I also did, before we start this, I also worked with, for 5 years in a senior facility, taking teams and doing visitation for 5 years. I had a very close friend who had Alzheimer's. My mother-in-law had Alzheimer's. And currently I have a 95-year-old aunt. My mother's 92, and my other aunt is 88. So I understand the concerns about where are they going to live? How are they going to be taken care of, and those kinds of things. So today in our presentation, we want to learn how to start a conversation with your loved one and to learn about the common housing options that are available for older adults, and to really take a deep dive into the emotional aspect and how a transition as an older adult would impact someone financially. And just look at how would you even plan for a housing transition. So to start out, the reason why it is so important to start the conversation is everyone has a desire, especially, it doesn't change when we become older, that we want to be independent. It's a really high value in our culture. But this is primarily, our ability to do that is primarily dependent on, can we be safe in our environment? And what is our health like? Is that going to impact our health? Or is our health impacting our ability to live in a particular, setting? So in keeping those things in mind all throughout this presentation, the reason that we're having these conversations is because as we grow older, there are, I would say, new safety issues and new health issues that a lot of us have to deal with. So if you were going to start the conversation, and I have had these conversations with my siblings about my parents and about when my great-grandmother had, she actually aged in place at my aunt's house until she was 102. But we had all these kinds of discussions, and we started very early, and we're still having them with my mother, and her desire to be independent at 92 with health challenges. So you have to have time to process. There are a lot of resistance to making a housing transition, and it's important to be able to have the lines of communication open. It's important to be empathetic and to offer your emotional support. Let them know you love and support them throughout the whole process. There may be disagreements, and I guess there needs to be an ability to agree to disagree if you're not all on the same page. And there are many different options, and the options that are available will depend on the older person's health and their mental health, their physical health. They have challenges, all of those things. So we could look at all the options and make the best choice that meets that particular person's needs. It's very important to keep the older adults a part of the conversation and to keep it open. It can be very challenging. Sometimes people tend to talk over older adults, especially as they get older, if they may be hard of hearing or they may have some communication challenges. It is so important to include them and to include other family members and professionals whenever possible so that you make the very best choices. These are options that are in DFW and our Metroplex. However, no matter where you live, if you're a smaller community or a rural community, you may not have as many options. But if you're in a larger Metroplex, you probably have all of these options. And you could go to find what particular options are available in your particular area by putting the, prompts in your, in your Google search for independent living, assisted living, continuing care, retirement, and they will pull up those areas if you put in your name of your town or your zip code. So these are the different options. Some older adults choose to live with their family or a caregiver. Now, this works really well. It's a multi-generational kind of living. It works really well if you have good family dynamics. There's ample space, and you can meet the seniors' needs for the support that they need emotionally and physically. And in looking at that as an option, you want to see, is this a sustainable thing? You don't want to have to move multiple times if at all possible. And I've helped a number of people in this kind of a circumstance. My grandmother lived with my aunt for 25 years. She lived with her daughter. And as she reached the end of her life, we needed to have caregiving 24/7 the last 6 months, but we continued to do that so she could stay with my aunt. You would call that aging in place as well, because she stayed in her environment, but she was still living with my aunt. And some families have like a little house on their property if they have a larger property. And there's a lot of builders that are looking at multi-generational living. And it's been really increased in the last several years, especially since COVID. 18% of housing choices are multi-generational, which is really amazing. The next choice is one that if they surveyed older adults from 50 to 80, 88% of them said that aging in place was really important to them. A lot of times this is the least expensive option, but as people age, older adults, 1 in 4 are going to be likely living alone eventually. And there has to be a capacity to do that. In order to age in place, you need to be fairly independent and be able to live comfortably and safely in your own environment. And it's important. We are going to talk about a little bit after we look at all these options about what does it take in order to age in place. But we'll move on to independent living communities. Independent living communities, there's 2 different types. There's rental, and then there's the type that you would purchase that would be, single family dwellings. And this wide range of cost depends on where it is, what kind of facility it is, and what kind of amenities they offer. And there are wonderful certified senior advisors who can help you make a good decision about what kind of facility would be the best for your particular loved one, looking at the finances, looking at their mental health, looking at their physical health and what their needs are. If someone wants to live independently and they want to purchase, there are 55 and older communities that are lovely, and they have lots of amenities. They provide a community environment for social, and a lot of times they will take care of all the external care of the home, so the maintenance would only be required of the person on the inside of their home. For other independent living communities that are rentals, these have a lot of amenities as well, besides the community aspect. And a lot of times you can also get meals. So that's wonderful. And I do have many adults that I've helped transition into independent living communities. Assisted living and memory care facilities, when people no longer can live independently and they need some help, these may be choices that need to be looked at. Of course, they're more expensive because they require greater intervention and care. And the range can vary greatly depending on how much extra care you're going to need. You can get help with physical assistance. You can get, excuse me, you can also have help with some of your activities, such as cleaning, or again, they provide meals. There is some, but they're not going to, for the assisted living, it would be someone that does not require skilled nursing care. A memory care facility is also very important for older adults who have memory-related challenges like Alzheimer's or dementia. But this is specialized care, and safety is a really big factor. I have a number of people, loved ones that I know that have had Alzheimer's, and it became no longer safe for them to live at home. Even before the disease had progressed to be affecting them physically, they were not safe in their own environment. And the people who work in these facilities have special training in dealing with memory care, and they really are wonderful for families who are not able to manage the care. And then a continuing care retirement community kind of has a conglomeration of all these kinds of cares in one. They have options for independent living. They have options for assisted living, options for memory care, but then you also can transition into skilled nursing care if you need that. I had one particular older couple that he had had a stroke and was in rehab and was not going to be able to return home. And she was no longer able to maintain the house. It was a home that they had lived in for a very long time. And they went into a continuing care retirement community. She lived in independent living. She has a 2-bedroom apartment, and he went into skilled nursing care. And she still lives there. He has since passed away. But it was a really good transition for them because they were in the same place, easily accessible, but it did not require her to be able to go to a different place. And eventually she may need extra care as well. So she's not going to have to move out of that facility. So one thing I wanted you to look at is the United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention has some criteria to be able to assess, could someone age in place? And this might give you a handle on if you would be able to have your seniors stay in their own environment. They need to be able to, these are activities of daily living, move from one position to another and walk independently, be able to feed yourself, select appropriate clothing and put them on. My friend that had Alzheimer's, I could tell when she was unable, I would show up to visit her and she was wearing her pajamas and she wasn't bathing or taking care of herself, that it was going to soon be time for her to transition to probably memory care. Control of bladder and bowel function, and to get to and from the bathroom is really important. Now, if you are unable to do all these things, if you have the support necessary for you to maintain your living at home, even though you have challenges in these areas, then you would need outside support. Instrumental activities of daily living are supportive kinds of things that will be needed in order for you to stay living at home. Someone is going to have to do shopping and meal prep if you can't do it yourself. You can hire somebody to house clean or do home maintenance if you're unable to do that. Managing transportation. This can be very difficult when seniors or older adults are no longer able to drive, so that you can organize some means of transportation. This could be family or friends. If you are in a senior community, oftentimes they provide transport to the store or to and from the doctor, so they take care of that. But if you're living at home, you're going to need to be able to get to and from your, going to the doctor and things like that. Managing your finances. This can become something that is challenging as people age. Some people are really a whiz at it, and other people are going to need help. For my mother, who still lives at home, she's 92, my brother handles managing her financial assets, and my sister pays her bills. So if you can get the help, then you can still age in place. Oh, sorry. Managing communication. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to get to that. I'm having a little problem. Please give me a second. Okay. Managing communication. This can be a challenge for older adults, all the technology. And I have found if you can find a younger person, if you have grandchildren or, family members who are more techie, they can help with these challenges. Setting up an iPhone if they want to be able to email or things like that. Managing medications. There are actually some pharmacies, and you'd have to check in your area, that if they do your prescriptions, they will provide your medications day by day by day, like evening and nighttime. My aunt did that for a long time, and now she does it at her assisted living. But pharmacies help with that. Or you can have, if you are in assisted living, even if you're not in the skilled nursing care, you can have staff help you with medications if that's a confusing thing. So I hope that's helpful. There is a tremendous emotional impact for moving. I can't tell you what a big deal this is. And to be aware older adults, my parents' generation were not outwardly showing their emotions. A lot of them kept their, emotions more inside. If they felt like a lot of things were private. And there are a lot of feelings involved in transitioning out of a home that you lived with, especially if it's been a long time. These are just a few of the ways that you may have emotional impact. Nostalgia and cherished memories. If older adults have lived somewhere for a long time, they may have raised their family there, had memories with their grandchildren, all kinds of things, had all kinds of really important milestones that had happened in that house. You might even have the marks on the door where you're measuring how tall your kids are. All of those things may be a part of that, and leaving that environment can be very, very difficult. The longer they've lived in a home, the more significant this could be. If an older adult is needing to transition because of health and safety, this highlights their vulnerability and maybe even their mortality. And those are also things that have an emotional impact. If Alzheimer's, I remember my friend who has Alzheimer's, and she was aware that she had the diagnosis, and she was so afraid, as she initially could tell that she was not able to remember. It was very scary. So that can create challenges. A lot of not just older adults, but people have a reluctance to want to burden others and their family members. And this can cause them to feel guilty if they are relying on you to help them. When your independence is threatened, it can affect your identity. And this can, and even your home, a lot of your identity can be wrapped up in where you live. So just to be aware of these things that are going on behind the scenes, maybe in their heart, that they're not articulating. Some people have significant attachment to possessions. Not everybody. I think millennials or younger people, a lot of them are minimalist. But a lot of older adults hold on tightly to things, and it is very difficult to let it go. And there can be loss and grief involved in a transition with older adults, especially if there's a family member. I've helped a lot of widows move, or people that I've helped, family members. I just had three brothers who were all older adults, and we had to sell their family home. It was an estate because both of their parents had passed away in the last year. So when grief, goes on top of all of these other things, it can be very difficult. And just to be aware of that as you're having these conversations. When people are emotionally stressed, you do not always see their best self. So it requires a lot of patience and a willingness to listen. So there are also many, many financial considerations. And the choices that you make finances may be a big part of that. When people are moving, it is really important that you surround yourself with professionals that can help you evaluate, the equity in your home and have proper property valuation. Many valuations that people receive, like online, there's all kinds of evaluations that are auto valuations, or even your tax valuation may be an auto valuation. In it's maybe different from state to state. In Texas, it is. In the DFW area, we get auto valuations. And it's important that someone's actually looking at comparable homes and seeing what they sold for and how that compares, finding like properties so that you can get an actual genuine valuation of that home, which is a big part of some older people's the equity in their home is a large part of what's going to help carry them into their older, into the other the years that are coming. It's important to evaluate the cost of selling. There are, depending on when and if they purchased a home before, or bought a home or sold a home, the process may be different now. And it's different from state to state, so I can't really address what all that looks like in your particular state. But there are costs of selling in any state that are pretty, I would say just about everyone has some real estate costs. They're probably going to have some tax costs. And there may be some cost in preparing the home, potential repairs or renovations to make the home more marketable. And that would have to be evaluated. And if you had, I would say, a professional real estate person with experience, they would be able to help you estimate what this cost of selling would be and what would be a proper valuation. There probably are going to be some downsizing expenses, including moving cost. And depending on whether you're going to move, close by or with a family member or to another state, that could be a significant expense. There may be some expenses for storage or for, new items that you're going to need because you're in a new environment, or modifications that you're going to make to your new environment so that it will work for you. Another option for older adults is reverse mortgages. It is so of the utmost important to get someone that is very experienced in reverse mortgages. There have been a lot of changes in reverse mortgages over the years, and they are not for everybody, but they can provide additional monthly income for an individual if they qualify. But you just need to understand all of the terms and implications of that. And I recommend that as you are having these meetings with professionals, if your older adult is the one that is still making their decisions, that you come alongside them if they're open and, be a part of the process. Whenever I meet with an older adult, I welcome family members to be a part if they want them to, because, it just gives them another pair of listening ears, someone to take notes for them, someone to give some input. But just realize that the market conditions may be different now than it was when you bought or sold. When you are having a transition as an older person, it may be a part of your retirement planning or your estate planning, and it could have legal implications. These are three of them at once. I think it's so important that you talk to financial advisors or senior care advisors. There are elder care advisors, attorneys. There are specialties. And you want someone who specializes in working with older adults, because there are some nuances of that. And you just want to be sure that you make the best plans in terms of retirement or estate planning. And the sooner you start doing that, the better. I highlighted this Medicaid eligibility because selling a home can affect Medicaid ability or eligibility for other government assisted programs. So it would be important to talk to a specialist about that as well, to make sure that the funds from the sale are reinvested in an appropriate way so as not to prevent this Medicaid eligibility. It's important to look at long-term healthcare cost or long-term care cost as well, if that isn't something that has already been done. So you can see that there are many financial considerations. There are many, many benefits of moving for older adults. They may not feel like benefits initially, but the first one would be simplifying, or I would call it simplifying is to simplify your life and to remove clutter and have an opportunity to have less to deal with, the maintenance, all of those things. It is so freeing. And sometimes you don't realize it until the event happens. The process is difficult, but when you get to a more simple lifestyle, it really is freeing. There can be a physical and financial burden of home maintenance. Obviously, we talked about there's financial gain to be had. A lot of older adults own their home outright. And when they transition out of their home, whether to buy a smaller home or to begin a rental situation or to move with family, they have all that equity that they can then use to fund their retirement, to cover healthcare expenses, or to invest in other financial opportunities. And many people have a lot of reduced expenses. I just had helped a couple this past summer. They lived in an enormous house. It was 4,500 square feet, and all their kids had moved out. They had a pool, they had a half-acre lot. It was just way too much for them. And they now have moved into they purchased in a 55 and older community. Their expenses are dramatically reduced. They've simplified, and it's just been it's relieved such a burden. They loved their home, but it has been a real blessing for them to transition out of that home when it was no longer meeting their needs. Some older people need increased accessibility or things to help with challenges. I actually had an older adult who was purchasing, and she was paraplegic. And we worked with her therapist, we worked with the builder, we worked with a lot of people, to her occupational therapist and her physical therapist, to make sure that her home provided the accessibility things that she needed for her special needs. And it was wonderful. I mean, the builder was wonderful. And with all of that input, she had every bell and whistle. She was able to do that. But this home worked so well for her, and she loved it. And it enabled her to be independent at home. A lot of people move to be closer to family or closer to healthcare. Proximity to family is the #1 reason that people are moving right now, not just older adults. And it is wonderful. It's so rewarding to see families have the joy of being close together and not needing to be even. I've helped a number of older adults move to other states so they could be close to their family. And it's been wonderful. Some people need to be closer to their health care if they lived in the country and now they're having health issues and they need to be closer to hospitals and their doctors, and that they may move in closer for that reason. Estate planning is something, as we talked about already, the emotional well-being for a lot of people. Once the move is over, and it's such a relief, it can bring just such a peace about having that behind them, that they finally have made that change. And I had one older adult, they moved, and their goal was they bought an RV and they wanted to be able to, their kids lived around and they wanted to be able to travel and visit them. And they didn't want to have all the burden of taking care of their big house now that all their children had gone. And it provided a lot of freedom for them. And many times, especially if it's, if a widow is at home or a widower, there's some social isolation, and going to a 55 and older community, whether it be a purchase or a rental, there's that community environment. And if you like social opportunities, I know these friends of mine that I helped move, they love living in the 55-year-old community. They have all kinds of activities they can do. They still have their own home, but this is all right there for them, and they really are enjoying it. So those are all some of the benefits for seniors to sell their home. One thing, this is just to let you know, when you are looking at having a transition, there are many different people that are going to be evaluating the home, and people have lots of different perspectives. That's why it's so important to have a professional realtor or appraiser to come and look at past sold comps and see what is the actual value or equity that you have in your home, so that you have a realistic expectation of what you can expect if you were going to have a transition and sell a property. The law of supply and demand, we all learned basic economics when we went to school. But the supply of homes for sale, when it's high compared with the number of buyers, then the supply of property is higher than the demand. So it's considered a buyer's market. Buyers have that advantage. A seller's market is like it was during the COVID years when there was a very small inventory, but lots of buyers with that high interest or low interest rate. And the inventory went just lower than it had ever been. So in different types of markets, different individuals have the advantage. And that changes. There are buyer's markets and there's seller's markets. So that's why it's important to have that evaluated and to be explained to you when you are actually ready to make the transition. This is just in terms of preparation. I actually helped an older lady, a widow, move. She had had two husbands and they both had the types of professions where there was a lot of paperwork, and she had a hard time letting go of that. And when I came to her house, when she was ready to transition to move closer to her daughters, she actually had a room with lots and lots of papers like this. And it can be difficult to go through this. It is so much easier to do this over time. And if you have difficulty, if you have rooms that look like this, sometimes you need to get some help to transition or work through this, all of the items that people have held on to. Only 10% of people that are purchasing a home can visualize. So the goal when we're transitioning and you want to sell a property is that you want to have it be appealing to the people that are coming so that you will get the most amount of equity out of that house. There's a lot of preparation that needs to take place before transitioning. Decluttering, which is important for older adults anyway, because it makes it difficult to find things if you have a lot of clutter, and you can be tripping or can create a problem with their mobility getting around. Keeping things clean and taking care of deferred maintenance keeps you in a position so that when it's time to transition, it will be smoother. When you are actually ready for a sale, depersonalizing the decor, neutralizing colors, or pre-packing non-essentials, these are all things that are beneficial if you want to get the very most out of a house in terms of the equity. It's never too early to start. And talking to a real estate professional can help you have some guidance about what would be the most important things. There are a lot of downsizing tips. Start early. The earlier, the better. My mom has started downsizing probably 10 years ago, even though she's still aging in place. And to create a plan, and if you're not a planner or your loved one is not a planner, there are people to help. You can get professionals to help you do this. And we have a really good group that we use here to help, but I'm sure you could inquire in your particular state, talk to a realtor, and they would have someone that would be able to help you. It's important to prioritize essentials so that you are keeping the things that are going to matter the most, and sort from room to room. And sometimes that's too much. Maybe you're doing drawer by drawer or shelf by shelf. That's why starting early is important if you have a lot of things. Downsizing your furniture. In most places will give you a floor plan so that you can kind of measure and plan in your mind how that furniture that you have here is going to work in your new place. And if it doesn't, then you'll have to make an arrangement for something else. It's great to digitalize your photos and your documents. And a younger person could help you do that. Sharing your passwords is really, really important. To just prepare for anything, at least one person, you should be able to get your parents or your loved ones' passwords, and then to donate and gift. Some other downsizing tips are to use storage wisely. Don't just take all your things and put them in storage, then you have to deal with them again. Having an estate sale, and we have lots of referrals for how that can be done to have someone help. Getting professional help. Involving family and friends is so important. My family helped us a lot, especially with our last move, and to plan for sentimental items. So important to consider safety. We had a lady currently, or I was just last in the fall, and she had mobility issues and could not leave the house for showings. So we made arrangements that would be safe for her to be there, like, and would be safe for the buyers to come. We provide lock boxes that are electronic, that have special showing codes. It's important to provide for all of these and to have conversations if you are actually showing a property for jewelry, medications, what if there are any weapons in the house, and actually even bank statements, not to leave important paperwork sitting out. I actually went to a home once and there were bank statements showing a house sitting on the desk. Preparing for selling, it may be different from state to state, but this is pretty generally the preparation phase, 2 to 3 months minimum if you have an older adult that's moving, if at all possible. You need to select your real estate agent, and it is wonderful if you can find, there are many people who have the senior real estate specialist designation, and that would be a good person to look for that has experience working with older adults, so that then they can come and help you with property preparation and setting the price and listing and marketing and all of those things. One of the things that I find when I've worked with a lot of older adults don't want to do electronics, so we'll paper sign everything if they want to. We make arrangements to meet their needs. We make arrangements to have showings be on their terms if they're not already out of the house. And we keep them in the loop, and we keep family members in the loop, knowing that the closing process, once you go under contract, is going to take about 30 to 60 days. If you have a cash sale, sometimes you can close much quicker. But if you have questions about selling a property, talking to a trusted real estate agent will help you with this process. And it's so important to have a support system around you. We addressed all these things, but you can see now, looking at this, why people need emotional support if they're going to transition, why they may need physical assistance if they have mobility issues, and keeping in mind their health and safety in the midst of the transition, that we maintain their social connections. It can be so stressful to be in the midst of a move. You probably have experienced it yourself. Any age person who's transitioning is going to have additional stress and anxiety, and having someone hold your hand and willing to come alongside you is very important, and having proper financial guidance that we talked about. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you will be better able to help your senior if they need to or your older adult if they need to transition. And I thank you for allowing me the time to help you learn a little bit more about housing transitions.
Joan, fantastic. Just a lot of information. And those of you that have been looking at chat, I've made a note that all listeners will receive a copy of this presentation. It'll come to you in a PDF format from WellMed. In addition, this is being recorded. It will be on both the WellMed Caregiver Teleconnection site as well as our familycaregiversonline.net website. It is hosted through YouTube, or it actually will be from YouTube. So be looking for that. Also made a statement about area agencies on aging, and you can reach these by calling 211 anywhere in the United States. They have what are called benefits counselors, and these are required by the federal government to provide help to people 60 and older and the family caregivers in the areas of trying to sort through and understand a little bit more about Medicare and Medicaid. Now, they won't give step-by-step detailed plans, but they're excellent at being able to provide checklists, guides, links to resources, and this is part of what they do through the Area Agency on Aging. Many of the communities also have Aging and Disability Resource Centers, ADRCs. The area agencies on aging are usually one of the prime partners with the ADRCs, but they also provide this connection to help people understand more and to go be connected to the appropriate resources. Um, Financial advisors, financial advisors, and elder law attorneys uh, frequently just ask, will provide a free consultation to talk about what kind of planning does a family need to do in terms of powers of attorney and wills and medical powers of attorney. Now, it will cost to actually execute those documents, but it is a way to kind of try to get a handle on all this. From a personal perspective, I just met with our financial advisor and an elder law attorney for this very thing because there's some medical issues within our own family that we're trying to prepare for. Also, in many communities, again, you can reach them through the 211 line. There are legal aid societies that will help with some of the legal issues. Um, Many churches have pro bono attorneys that maybe are members of the church that can at least help to answer some questions. And then, as Joan is talking, these real estate professionals that can help with what Joan has been talking about. You can tell by what she's given, the information she's given us today. She specializes in these relocations, but also she knows a lot about just the necessity of having the conversations. Don't wait too long. Um, Ask questions. What kind of, and I've not seen chat questions, but now would be an excellent time for you to pose any questions or comments to Joan. Or if you want to pose a question to her directly, please do so. Now's the perfect time to do that. Well, sometimes when people are reluctant to say anything, I'll pose a question back to listeners. What one thing did you hear Joan talking about today that really hit home for you and that made you um, pause and say, ah, that's something I hadn't thought about, or I need to do something with it? By the way, WellMed is just starting something today. We're really excited that they're doing it. Some very simple, straightforward, it's a session survey, and it just popped up on your screen. Overall, how satisfied were you with the session today? And so if you would just take a couple of minutes to answer that, and if there are any specific feedback that you want to provide us, do that, as well as what topics do you want to know more about. We will have an attorney in the next couple of months. We also have a financial advisor that's already scheduled. Next month, the topic will be about essential conversations, and it will be about the powers of attorney and all of the advanced directives. So it's those real concrete things that very often people don't like to talk about, but you have to before things become a crisis. So that said, what comments or questions do you have? What one thing did you get out of what Joan had to say? If you could just type it, share it with us. Well, Joan, I guess all questions were in. All right, here we are. Hold on a second. B says, I take care of my mom and dad, but also need to start thinking about me and my spouse's future. I enjoyed seeing the aging in place. This will help me make a decision as to when it's time for mom and dad to transition to something different. You want to comment on that, Joan?
Well, whether or not someone can age in place is really dependent on how much support can be provided to them in their current situation. For my mother, she's 92 and she's had a year and a half of extreme medical challenge, but we have an extremely large family. And for the last year and a half, she's had 7 times when she's had medical crisis where she's needed someone to be there 24/7 or 6 weeks at a time. And we had enough coverage with family, but that would be a highly unusual situation. If she needed care, but we were able to provide it. I went up to help, my sisters helped, my brothers helped, grandchildren helped, lots of people helped. But not everybody has that depth of help within family. So, she probably would have had to go to assisted living had it not been for the extreme amount of family that she had. And it really depends on people's individual circumstances.
Mhm.
And when there's mental challenges, with dementia or Alzheimer's, even early Alzheimer's, safety becomes a real issue. And you almost need someone there 24/7 so that, they could go out and get the mail and not come back and find their own house. I mean, it can be really challenging. So I think it's so individual. And those were just guidelines. But, and getting someone certified senior assistant or person, there are people with certifications in dealing with dementia and dealing with helping seniors transition, not just a realtor, but all kinds of transitions. Having their input and help will help make those decisions that would be best for your family.
And if I can offer, there is something called a certified senior advisor.
So
And
that's it.
these are folks that have, very often they're nurses or they have a lot of medical background too. They're excellent at being able to pull the resources together. The reality, of course, is these services do cost money. And that sometimes is a real challenge for caregivers and for older adults, that they don't feel like they either can afford it or they frankly can't afford it. And that's when going to some of the public service providers like the Area Agency on Aging, they're certainly not going to be able to provide the in-depth help. But on our Family Caregivers Online website, we provide a lot of resources, a lot of checklists, a lot of planning documents, frequently asked questions. It would be worthwhile to take advantage of that as a resource. And all of the services that we provide are all federally funded. Your tax dollars help to pay for that. And so we just encourage you to not put off giving some thought to some of these really important issues, because when you're in a crisis is not the best time to make these kinds of plans. And as Joan says, it depends on not only the resources within the families, but whether or not the medical situation is such that a person can age in place without a significant amount of money spent on in-home care. Non-medical care in our area can range anywhere from $30 to $60 an hour, and that's non-medical.
Mhm.
So these are all issues that are not paid for by the government or these agencies. It helps if you have long-term care insurance. But giving some thought and talking to some of the professionals can make a huge difference in the stress that you carry moving forward, planning for your family members or for yourselves. Has anyone worked um, with the Area Agency on Aging or ADRC on any of these issues? I'm curious to know how many of you even were aware of the Area Agency on Aging, because very often people aren't. They're just not aware. We have a society that really didn't like to talk about aging, although more and more it is right here in front of us. So many of us, of we baby boomers, there's a lot of us and we need help because our health is such that we need help. Does anybody have anything else to contribute as far as what one thing did you learn from Joan today that you either didn't know or you're going to do something with? Okay, B said had heard of Area Agency on Aging, but not sure the role of the agency is or it provides. Again, go to our website, Family Caregivers Online, and it is in the link is in the chat. It was one of the first comments that I posted, and you can link directly from our site to Area Agency on Aging in the North Central Texas area, but also there are area agencies on aging throughout the United States. They are mandated by Health and Human Services to provide resources and help to people who are 60 and older and their family caregivers. So that will be a good way to find out what they are, what they do, what they don't do. And there are many services that they provide that are not income-based. Again, it depends on the region. There are not as many resources in the rural areas as there are in the larger areas, but just check them out. Area agencies on aging help pay for the federal money, helps pay for Meals on Wheels programs, for things such as ramps, building ramps. There's all types of resources that are available for you to check into. And again, go to the website. There's we have a pretty robust, thanks to Paula's expertise, there's a pretty robust search function on our website, as well as a whole section on blogs, frequently asked questions, a resource directory where you could go in and put keywords and it will pull up some of these organizations. And again, you're going to find these to some extent or another throughout the United States. It isn't just in Texas or in our area. Other comments? What one thing is your takeaway from today? And some of you may be thinking, I wish I would have known this about 6 months ago. Well, now you know, at least you can share it. And remember, you can go back and listen to the recording. It'll be on our website and on YouTube, and it'll be posted the direct links from Caregiver Teleconnection. And Joan, would you take a moment to summarize what you think are some important points that you made today that will help those of the folks that are listening?
I think the very last slide that we had that was on having a support system around you. I mean, it kind of touched on all of the topics that we talked about. It's so important for older adults to have a support system around them so that they would be able to transition to whatever life, presents to them. Sometimes it's a suddenly, and sometimes it's something you can plan for.
Mhm.
I had this one lady that I had shared about, her husband had a stroke and then he was in rehab and then he wasn't going to be able to come back home. So that was a suddenly, and that was very difficult. But if you are having these conversations early and you are talking about it and you are at least it's on your radar and you're beginning to plan, then you're less apt to be caught by surprise without having made any preparations. So beginning the conversation early and beginning to take steps, realizing that eventually we're all going to get older and probably the health that we have today it's likely that it could change. And just to be thinking about what would that look like? Where would I want to go? What would I do? And begin to make some plans and to include your family in that, and and just realize it impacts your whole life. I mean, emotionally, financially, can be physically. I mean, you're socially, all of these things are impacted by a move. So it would be what I.
Absolutely. Excellent points. And we also realize, many of you that are listening, in my experience in working with caregivers over the last 20 years, there are some people out there, they don't feel like they have any support. They don't have the resources. They don't have family they can turn to. And sometimes it's because caregivers haven't asked, or they feel like, well, my family is busy, they've got other responsibilities. But we don't know until we do ask, until we do start talking about it, because frequently caregivers will hide behind a veil that, oh, everything's fine, it's fine, but it's not fine. And the sooner we can start that conversation, the better. Even if it's something small. In my case, I asked my nephew to come over. I'm 71. My husband's had some issues come up in the last 6 months that made me start pushing my timeline faster. But I asked my nephew to come over and help me clean out my garage. Now, I gave him a financial incentive, but as we were, and I also had somebody else here, and as we were going through a lot of things, it gave us a chance to really talk about the realities of what's going on. And toward the end of this time together, I had gone over to pick something up, and he said, no, 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 you don't need to be doing that. I was frankly surprised, but there was something in that experience that got his attention. He's 23, and it got his attention. So it's never too soon to start involving them, even if it's something small. Because there is a tendency to people to kind of stay in denial, unless we talk about it, or they see it. It's just the way it is.
And the importance of respite.
The importance of
Caretakers.
respite, the relief, the
You
getting
need to have
away.
you need to have some breaks.
Absolutely. And that means realizing that your family members have a full life. And when did parents or grandparents stop being important too? They have to be absolutely the respite. Just a few hours, if not a full day or more,
Mhm.
can be extremely important. Respite. And that's another thing area agencies on aging do. Most of them have systems in place to provide, and it usually there's more demand than there is our resources. But respite is one of the areas that area agencies on aging can help you with. It's not permanent. It's usually a small amount of money. There frequently is a waiting list, but you have to ask. As I said, on our website, we've got planning checklists. Make a plan. What do I really need right now?
A lot of churches will provide help. Like I know my kids were involved in different youth groups, and we'd have older people in our church, and they would go over and do their yard for them, or
Mhm.
or do help like with things with cleaning out a garage or things like that.
Ab-
When it was a service kind of thing, but it was
Right.
a win-win because there's so many benefits of interacting with people that are older. There's
Absolutely.
wisdom, there's life experience. There's so many wonderful things that can happen when you put
Excellent
with
point. Excellent point. And people are so spread out, families are spread out. So having a local, like a church, and it's also real good for young people if
It is
they
good for you.
learn more if they're doing some kind of a service for an older adult or a neighbor. It really makes a huge difference. Excellent point. Joan, thank you. Just a wealth of information. And it may be that many of you are going to have to just think through all of this and review the slide presentation that you're going to get and listen to the tape again, because this is a very important area for everyone. It's all about independence and safety. Health and safety and independence, they're all interconnected as we age. Again, Joan, thank you again for all the time you put into this. And it's very obvious what a big heart you have about this. And we certainly acknowledge that and appreciate it. Everyone, thank you for your time, and you'll be getting, please do complete the survey questions. There's just 8 of them, and they're real easy to do. That way you won't have anything you have to think about later to evaluate. You'll be getting the announcements of next month's programs. We appreciate the time you spent with us, and if you have other questions, send them on through. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.